You know, you hear this term Shana thrown around a lot, especially in like meditation circles,
Hmm.
and it can feel a bit, I don't know, mysterious, maybe even kind of mythical.
Yeah, a little intimidating sometimes.
Exactly. And if you're like me, you've probably wondered, okay, what is it really? How do you get your head around it?
Right.
So, whether you're maybe prepping for a deeper meditation practice, or you've bumped into it reading Buddhist philosophy, or you're just curious.
Which is totally fair.
Yeah. We've done a bit of digging into a really key text. Our goal here is to give you a clear picture without, getting totally lost in the weeds.
That's the plan. We know everyone's busy, so we've spent some time with a foundational source, the Visuddhimagga. It's often called the Path of Purification.
Ah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it has a solid reputation for being incredibly thorough, really systematic in how it lays out core Buddhist teachings, and it always ties things back to the Four Noble Truths. Think of it like a master class, really, drawing directly from the earliest scriptures that Tipitaka. Now, sure, there are other important commentaries, on the Nikayas, the Vinaya, the Abhidhamma,
Right.
but very often they actually point back to the Visuddhimagga for these, core explanations.
Gotcha. So it's a pretty central text for this kind of thing.
Definitely.
So for this deep dive, then, our mission, if you will, is to really unpack how the Visuddhimagga presents jhana.
Yeah.
We want to look at its approach, see what the key ingredients are, and, well, hopefully distill it down into something streamlined, something you can actually grasp, maybe even see how it connects to your own experience.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's dig in. Where does the Visuddhimagga even start with jhana? How does it frame it?
Well, the first thing it does, which is super important, is place jhana within a bigger picture. It's not just some isolated technique.
Okay.
It falls squarely under the umbrella of concentration or samadhi.
Samadhi, right? Ah.
Concentration. And if you look at that classic threefold training in Buddhism, you know, virtue, concentration, and understanding.
Sila, Samadhi, Panya.
Exactly. The Visuddhimagga clearly puts concentration, samadhi, as part two, right after part one, virtue sila, and before understanding, panya.
Oh, okay. So it builds on a foundation of ethics, of virtue.
Hmm.
It's not just about mental gymnastics.
Precisely. That ethical grounding is seen as essential.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. And what about the why? Why develop this concentration? What's the point, according to the text?
The Visuddhimagga is pretty direct about this. The whole purpose of cultivating this kind of concentration jhana is basically to abandon what it calls wrong concentration.
Wrong concentration. Huh, what does that mean?
It suggests there are ways our minds can get focused, but maybe in unhelpful directions. Like you could be intensely focused on something out of greed or anger, or just get really agitated and stuck.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, like being obsessively focused on something negative.
Exactly. So jhana, as the text describes it, is the path towards a skillful kind of focus, something beneficial that actually leads towards liberation, not more entanglement.
Okay, so it's about refining attention, moving away from scattered or like unwholesome focus towards something more constructive, more liberating.
You got it.
Now, one word that pops up really early in connection with jhana is seclusion. The text says you need to be quite secluded from sense desires, quite secluded from unprofitable things.
That sounds
Yeah,
intense. Do we need a cave?
well, a quiet cave probably wouldn't hurt. But the Visuddhimagga gives us a more nuanced take on seclusion. It's not just about physical isolation.
Okay, good.
It actually breaks it down. First, there is bodily seclusion. That's the straightforward one. Being in a quiet place, away from noise, hustle and bustle, strong sensory input.
Right. Finding a calm environment.
Then, maybe more importantly, there's mental seclusion. This is about stepping back internally from unwholesome mental states. Things like craving, ill will, restlessness, doubt, the hindrances. Ah, so it's an inner quiet, too, even if the outside world isn't perfectly silent.
Exactly. Cultivating that inner space. And there's a third type mentioned, which is really interesting.
Oh, yeah?
It's called seclusion by suppression, or sometimes translated as suspension. This refers to how the hindrances, those mental obstacles, get temporarily quieted or suppressed by the power of the concentration itself as you actually enter jhana.
Whoa, okay. So the practice itself creates deeper seclusion.
In a way, yes. You need some initial, quiet, external and internal, to get started. But as the concentration deepens, it naturally pushes those distractions further into the background. It reinforces the seclusion.
That's fascinating. It's like a positive feedback loop.
Kind of, yeah.
So the Visuddhimagga talks about these jhanas as progressive stages, right?
Right.
Like steps on a ladder.
That's a good way to think about
Oh,
it.
yeah.
It describes them as a series of increasingly refined, increasingly tranquil states of mental absorption. Each one is seen as quieter, more peaceful, more subtle than the one before it.
Okay, let's walk through them then. Starting at the bottom rung, the first jhana. What are the key characteristics? What does the Visuddhimagga say defines it?
Right, the first jhana, according to the text, it has five main factors or components. There's applied thought, which is called vitaka.
Applied thought, like thinking about something.
Sort of, but maybe more like directing the mind onto the object of meditation, like the breath. Initially placing your attention there, like aiming a flashlight beam.
Okay, directing the mind. Got it. What else?
Then there's sustained thought, Vikara. This is more about keeping the attention on the object, exploring it, examining it, but in a connected way, not letting it drift off constantly, keeping the flashlight steady.
So directing it, then keeping it there. Makes sense.
Exactly. Then accompanying these are joy, piti, which is often described as a more physical sense of zest or enthusiasm.
Like a buzz.
Yeah, sometimes. And happiness, sukha, which is more of a mental pleasure, a contentment.
Okay, joy and happiness.
And finally, the fifth factor is unification of mind, ekagata, one-pointedness. The mind is gathered, focused.
So, five things: directing thought, sustaining thought, joy, happiness, and unification.
Yep. And the Visuddhimagga stresses that getting here to this first jhana is basically the result of successfully stepping away from being absorbed in ordinary sense desires and those mental hindrances we talked about.
Right, the seclusion pays off.
It does.
So, even in this first stage, there's still some mental activity, the directing and sustaining. How does the second jhana differ? What gets refined?
The key shift into the second jhana is the letting go, the abandoning of that initial applied thought, the vitaka.
Ah, so you don't need to actively direct the mind anymore.
Exactly. The mind has settled more. It stays with the object more naturally, so vitaka drops away.
Okay.
What remains are the other four factors:
Uh,
sustained thought, vikara, joy, piti, happiness, sukha, and unification. Okay, okay.
So, four factors now instead of five.
Right. And because that more effortful directing is gone, the second jhana is considered quieter, more tranquil, more internally assured than the first. The mind is less busy.
Less discursive, still exploring gently with sustained thought, but calmer.
Precisely. It's a deepening of that stillness.
Okay. So, following that pattern, what happens when we move to the third jhana?
Well, the refinement continues. In the third jhana, that sustained thought, the vikara, also fades away. It's relinquished.
So, both the directing and the sustaining thoughts are gone now.
Yep, both gone. This leaves just three factors:
Mm-hmm.
joy, piti, happiness, sukha, and unification of mind, ekagata.
Three factors. Wow, the mind must be getting pretty quiet.
Very quiet. With both applied and sustained thought absent, there's significantly less mental activity. This leads to an even deeper sense of inner peace. The joy and happiness are still there, very present, but the background is much stiller.
Okay. And then the fourth jhana. This one often gets described as a really major shift. What's the key difference here, according to the Visuddhimagga?
It is a crucial transition. In the fourth jhana, even the factor of joy, piti, that more energetic zest, is let go of. It's transcended.
Even the joy. Huh. So what's left?
What remains are primarily two factors. First, there's equanimity, upekkha, specifically as a feeling tone. This profound sense of balance, neutrality, stillness, not being pulled this way or that.
Equanimity, like stable and balanced.
Exactly. And second, there's unification of mind, ekagata, which remains constant throughout the jhanas, just getting deeper.
Okay, equanimity and unification. What about the happiness from the third jhana?
That's a good point. The text says happiness, sukha, is also present, but it needs clarification. It's not the same sukha as in the third jhana, which was tied to joy. Here, it's a very subtle, peaceful contentment that is compatible with equanimity. It's like the deep peace behind the equanimity.
Ah, okay. A much more subtle form of well-being.
Very subtle. In fact, the Visuddhimagga points out that compared to the profound peace of fourth jhana equanimity, the bliss and happiness of the third jhana can start to feel a bit coarse, almost agitated in comparison.
Wow, even bliss can feel coarse.
It's all relative to the deepening refinement. The text also specifically mentions mindfulness purified by equanimity in the fourth jhana.
Mindfulness purified by equanimity. What does that imply?
It suggests a state of very clear, very stable, unbiased awareness. Because the mind isn't being swayed by strong attraction like intense joy or aversion, it can see things with exceptional clarity and balance. Equanimity provides the stable platform for pure awareness.
That's a really powerful state, moving beyond even pleasant emotions towards this balanced, clear seeing.
That's the essence of it.
Now, you mentioned the Visuddhimagga also touches on states beyond the fourth jhana. These immaterial attainments, what are those, briefly?
Yeah, building on that stable platform of the fourth jhana, the text describes further refinements of concentration. These involve shifting the object of focus away from anything physical or sensory towards very subtle, abstract bases.
Like what?
They're usually listed as the base consisting of boundless space, then boundless consciousness, then nothingness, and finally the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception.
Whoa. Boundless space, boundless consciousness. That sounds pretty profound.
It's very deep territory. The text presents these as further possibilities for developing concentration, particularly, it notes, for those who might seek the unique kind of peace found in these formless realms.
Exploring the nature of consciousness itself, it sounds like.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, going back to the main jhanas, the first four, you highlighted how the number of factors decreases. 5, then 4, 3, then 2, and the fourth. Does the Visuddhimagga explain why these factors drop away like that?
It acknowledges there's been some discussion about this among commentators over time. Different ideas have been proposed.
Like what?
Well, some suggested it depends on how the jhana is being used, maybe as a basis just for insight meditation. Others thought it related to what aspect of experience, like the aggregates, was being examined. Some even thought it might be down to individual meditators' inclinations.
So different theories.
Right. But the Visuddhimagga itself seems to put the emphasis more on the role of insight during the process. It talks about preliminary insight and insight leading to emergence from a jhana.
Insight leading to emergence.
Yeah, the idea seems to be that as you emerge from a jhana and reflect, you gain insight into the factors that were present. You see the relative coarseness of certain factors compared to potentially quieter states.
Ah, so you realize that, say, applied thought is kind of noisy compared to just sustained thought?
Exactly. And that insight fuels the letting go. So the diminishing factors aren't arbitrary. They reflect a natural purification and deepening of the mind as understanding grows alongside concentration. The coarser elements just naturally fall away as the mind settles.
Okay, that makes sense. It's an organic process driven by awareness and concentration working together.
That seems to be the core idea in the Visuddhimagga.
So let's try and pull this all together now. We've gone through the stages, the factors, the role of seclusion. How can we distill this down? What's the streamlined but still comprehensive takeaway for someone trying to understand jhana based on this text?
I think the main thread, the core principle running through all of this, is this idea of progressive refinement.
Progressive refinement.
It starts with finding that quiet space, inside and out, the seclusion part,
Right.
and then it's a systematic process of letting go. You gradually release the mental and emotional factors that the text considers more gross or active.
Starting with sense desire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Moving away from being caught up in the senses, you achieve that initial focus state, the first jhana, using applied and sustained thought.
Mm-hmm.
Then you refine it further. You let go of the active directing and sustaining of thought, making the mind quieter, more stable.
Moving into second and third jhana.
Right. And then the refinement goes even deeper. You move beyond even the strong, pleasant feelings of joy and intense happiness, cultivating that profound balance of equanimity in the fourth jhana.
While keeping the mind unified.
Always keeping the mind unified and focused. So it's like the mind is shedding layers of activity and reactivity, becoming progressively stiller, clearer, and more balanced.
A step-by-step letting go of mental noise and emotional intensity to reach deeper calm and focus.
That's a great way to put it. And crucial to this, as the Visuddhimagga emphasizes, is mindfulness and clear comprehension, especially when you emerge from a state.
Why especially on emerging?
Because that's when you can clearly reflect. You look back at the jhana state you were just in, identify its factors, and see, okay, compared to what might be possible next, this factor feels a bit coarse. That understanding allows you to let it go and move deeper next time.
So you need that awareness after the deep absorption to understand the process and progress further.
Exactly. It's this cycle of concentration, emergence, reflection, understanding, and then re-entering with that refined intention.
Got it. And you mentioned earlier the text connects this deepening concentration to the breath becoming quieter, something about tranquilizing the bodily formation.
Yes, that's a really interesting point it makes. Bodily formation here refers primarily to the in-breaths and out-breaths.
Okay.
As concentration deepens through the khanas, the physical breath itself is said to become naturally more and more subtle, finer, calmer.
So it's not something you force.
No, not at all. It's described as a natural consequence. In the beginning, your breath might feel quite obvious, maybe even a bit ragged.
Yeah.
But as you enter the deeper jhanas, particularly the fourth, the breath can become so subtle it might feel like it has almost stopped entirely.
Wow.
This calming of the breath is seen as a physical sign, a correlate of the deep mental stillness that's been achieved. The breath becomes a kind of barometer for the depth of your concentration.
That's fascinating. A tangible indicator. Now, importantly, the Visuddhimagga doesn't present jhana as the end goal, does it? It's more like a tool or a foundation.
Absolutely not the end goal. That's a critical point. Developing jhana is primarily seen as creating a powerful foundation, an essential stepping stone for developing wisdom and insight, vipassana, or panya.
The third part of the training, virtue, concentration, wisdom.
Exactly. The incredible stillness, clarity, and focused power of the Jhatanic mind provides, well, an exceptional launching pad for investigating the true nature of reality much more deeply and accurately.
So how does that work? How does emerging from jhana actually help develop insight? What's the mechanism described?
Well, the text explains that when you mindfully come out of a jhana state,
Okay.
you then turn that clear, stable mind towards contemplating the experience itself. You look at the mental factors that were just present, the equanimity, the unification, even the subtle happiness,
Right.
and you examine them through the lens of the three characteristics of existence.
Yeah.
Are they permanent, or do they arise and cease? Impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
Are they ultimately satisfying? Or is there a subtle stress or potential for suffering even in these high states if clung to? Unsatisfactoriness.
Okay.
And do they have a solid independent self or I controlling them? Or are they conditioned phenomena, not self?
Examining impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self.
Exactly. By seeing these characteristics directly in even these very refined jhanic states, the mind starts to develop dispassion. It sees that even these blissful or peaceful states aren't ultimately reliable, aren't me or mine.
Ah, so the clinging starts to lessen.
Precisely. That leads to detachment, letting go. The Visuddhimagga actually has a whole section on this called Knowledge of Contemplation of Dissolution, which details how seeing the arising and passing away of phenomena, even subtle ones, leads to liberation.
So you leverage the clarity of jhana to see reality more clearly, which undermines clinging and leads towards freedom.
That's the path it lays out.
Now, one more thing. The Visuddhimagga does mention these supernormal powers or siddhi that can come from jhana mastery. How central is that? Is that what people should be aiming for?
It's definitely mentioned. There's a chapter dedicated to it, describing things like powers of determination, transformation, creating a mind-made body.
Right. Sounds pretty extraordinary.
It does. But, and this is really important in the context of the Visuddhimagga's overall message, these powers are generally presented as potential byproducts of deep concentration, not the main event.
Ah, side effects, almost.
You could say that. They aren't the goal of the path to liberation. The real focus remains firmly on developing that wisdom, that insight into reality, which is what actually cuts through ignorance and ends suffering. Getting sidetracked by powers is often seen as a potential pitfall.
That's a really crucial distinction. It's easy to get dazzled by the idea of special powers and miss the deeper point.
Very easy. The text puts the emphasis squarely on wisdom.
Okay, so wrapping this up then, if someone listening wanted the key takeaways from this deep dive into the Visuddhimagga on jhana, what should they remember? What are the essentials?
I'd say the core idea is that jhana is a structured, gradual training of the mind. It leads to progressively deeper, more refined states of concentration.
Structured and gradual.
Yeah, it starts with finding quiet, internally and externally. Then it involves a systematic letting go, shedding layers of mental activity, like discursive thought and emotional intensity, even strong positive ones like joy,
Moving towards.
moving towards profound equanimity, balance, and unified awareness, deep inner stillness and clarity.
Okay,
And while the details of the factors for each jhana provide a kind of map,
right.
the fundamental principle is that journey towards stillness. And crucially, this whole process isn't an end in itself, but serves as an incredibly powerful foundation for gaining insight, for wisdom, for understanding the true nature of things.
That's a fantastic summary. It really brings clarity to what can seem like a complex map. It makes Jhana feel less like some unobtainable mystical state and more like a, well, progressive path of mental cultivation.
That's certainly how the Visuddhimagga presents it.
Reflecting on this whole progression, letting go of thoughts, then strong emotions, finding equanimity, it makes you think about our everyday minds, doesn't
Oh,
it?
absolutely.
All the distractions, the mental chatter, the emotional ups and downs. How could maybe understanding the structured approach, even just intellectually, help us navigate our own daily experience of focus or lack thereof?
That's a great question. For me, what really resonates is that emphasis on the gradual nature. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah.
The text lays out steps. Maybe we can see small ways in our own lives to cultivate just a little more mental seclusion, even for a few moments.
Hmm.
Or notice when we're caught in applied and sustained thought about something unhelpful, and just gently try to let that initial directing soften a bit.
Little steps of refinement in daily life. I like that. And it also makes me curious about that connection between the stable Jhanic mind and the arising of insight. How exactly does that stable platform allow for those deeper realizations?
Right. How does that clear, calm seeing translate into understanding impermanence or not self in a way that actually transforms you? That link is fascinating.
Definitely feels like fertile ground for another deep dive, perhaps?
Yeah,
Exploring that Chana Vipassana relationship more, or even looking at practical ways people try to cultivate these states today.
could be very interesting.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. Thanks so much for walking us through the Visuddhimagga's take on jhana.
My pleasure. It's rich material.
Absolutely. Until our next deep dive.